Chapter 14, Managerial Accounting. In this chapter, we'll talk about the difference between financial and managerial accounting. We'll also talk about the difference between product cost and period cost. And we'll talk about how you can take product cost and combine them together to make a cost of goods manufactured schedule. So the basic difference between financial accounting and managerial accounting is that financial accounting is for external users and managerial accounting is for internal users. So an example of an internal user would be management. So of course, management would require information that's specific in nature. So for example, management would require information such as how many units they have to sell to break even, or what selling price they should set their product at. Financial accounting is more general purpose in nature. So if you took financial accounting, you learned that there are 4 financial statements. There's an income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow, and statement of stockholders' equity. Also, know that financial accounting is very much rules-based. So for financial accounting, if you don't understand Chapter 1, Chapter 2 is very difficult to understand because everything builds upon itself. Whereas in managerial accounting, everything is a self-contained unit. Next, let's talk about manufacturing costs. Manufacturing cost is also called product cost. So another name for manufacturing cost would be product cost, or also we can call it total manufacturing cost. So those are the 3 different terms that you should know. So for manufacturing cost, we have 3 different types: direct material, we have direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Direct labor is basically the materials that go into a product. Typically, these are the main materials that go into a product. For example, if we build a car, the steel would be direct material. We can measure how much steel we use in a car, and we know how much the steel costs. So we can measure it in an economically feasible manner. Direct labor is the work that goes into building something. So if we think about a car, the factory assembly line workers, their salary or work would be considered direct labor. Manufacturing overhead includes indirect materials and indirect labor and everything else. So manufacturing overhead is something that is needed to make a product, but you can't measure exactly how much goes into each individual unit. So for example, if I make a car, what about if I use glue? If I use glue to attach certain components on the car on the inside, nobody measures how much glue is actually used. So that would be considered manufacturing overhead. What about if I use grease? Nobody exactly measures how much grease I'm going to use to make a car, so that would be manufacturing overhead. What these 3 things have in common is that they're all required to make a product. So we can say that if you design a product, you can have 3 types of manufacturing costs. Direct labor is the second one. The first one is direct materials. And then the third one is manufacturing overhead. Remember, product cost is something that is needed to make the product. Period cost is something that is not needed to make the product. And there's 2 kinds of period cost: selling expense and administrative expense. Let me give you an example. What about marketing? Marketing is a type of selling expense. Do you need marketing to make the product? No, you don't need marketing to make or manufacture the product. So that's called a period cost. So here are a couple of examples here. And you can see that materials, like if you're going to build snowboards, This is a snowboard factory in this example. If you use materials, the materials are direct materials. The labor cost is direct labor. And look at this, depreciation on factory equipment. Okay, so that's manufacturing overhead. The reason is because do you need factory equipment to make your product? Probably. So that means that you need the depreciation on the factory equipment. That's going to be manufacturing overhead. Property taxes on factory building. What if I don't want to pay the property taxes on the factory building? That would mean no factory. So, of course, property taxes on factory building are very important. You need that to manufacture your product, but nobody knows exactly how much property tax goes into each individual unit. So we call that manufacturing overhead. Let's look at a couple of other examples. Advertising cost. I said that was period cost. What are some other period costs that you see here? Sales commission. You don't need to have sales commission to make the product. It's not required for manufacturing. You can combine all of the different components into what we call a cost of goods manufactured schedule. So what I want to point out is a couple of things here. Take a look at total manufacturing cost. So total manufacturing cost is here at the bottom. So total manufacturing cost, that's equal to direct materials plus direct labor plus manufacturing overhead. That's called total manufacturing cost. So let's think about how you can read this. So how much work in process, how much stuff were we working on at the beginning of the month? It's $18,400. What are the costs that we have during the period? Well, we have direct materials, which is $146,400. You can see that in the middle there, the top number. We have direct labor, which is $175,600. And you have manufacturing overhead, which is $54,800. What happens if you took direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead? If you combine them together, what number do you get? You get $376,800. So what is the total cost of all the stuff I'm working on? Well, how much stuff did you have at the beginning? $18,400. Plus, how much stuff did you start working on? What is the total manufacturing cost? That's $376,800. So the total cost of work in process is $395,200. How much stuff was still left over at the end? $25,200. So what is the cost of the goods that we've manufactured? How much did it cost us to manufacture our goods? $370,000. So those are the main things that you need to know for Chapter 14.